Okay, so I think we sort of landed in sort of romance stories as the midpoint between princesses and porn.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because it's not like it's a shorthand, it's a heuristic, but it's ishy, right?
Yeah.
Because that then we get into this language thing again, which I do think it really is. I personally think that elements of the human condition do not change. People talk about loneliness like crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's all loneliness, especially you hear a lot about male loneliness. And yet, then when there's a Rammstein song off their most recent album about this. It's actually a far more clever song than people would think from what it's about. That it basically translates to big tits. That's the name of the song. But it's this very lonely guy who what he really wants is companionship, but he's talking about it in the language of women's body parts. And I thought that's brilliant. Like that song
Interesting.
gets it, man. And I what I don't understand is why you know people I get this as people get a little bit annoyed by sort of the fangirl shipping, and I know guys are super threatened by the whole Thor thing. We've seen some of the really bad flame out bad reactions to guys thinking women are interested in Thor because of how he looks.
I I started to make that point before,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I want
yeah.
to be very clear. So it's for me, like I don't look at shirtless Captain America the same way I do Thor. Because
Captain America was shirtless.
there was one or two points.
Okay, that went right by me, which proves your
Yeah,
point, right? Like I don't
yeah.
remember that.
I don't care because it's like on one hand I kind of wish I liked the down home all American guy. No, I like the Viking prince. I like the barbarian prince.
Right.
So that's why Thor works for me. And then you throw on that heavy layer of a complete romantic, and I am completely sold. Aquaman, oh dang, he looks so good. But
And,
I like him slightly less so because he's
if it was who do I want to play Xbox with? Because that's my question for it's definitely Thor. Way more. Thor is less of an asshole.
I mean, for me, it's not just about the sexuality. It's okay, who do I want to cuddle with? Who do I think would actually be a good partner? And I don't get that same response when I see Captain America or Bucky or any of these other characters. And
Really?
it's
Oh my god, I think Steve Rogers is like ultimate. Even Sam. Sam's so good. Like Sam's so good that way, man. He's a grief
well,
counselor. Oh my
like
god, perfect, right?
I said, I guess Steve would be a kind of second choice, but
Okay.
still, it just doesn't hit me the same way. So it's like, it's not just that a shirtless guy with muscles, it's not, that doesn't do much for me. It's not the way I see some guys with women where it's like, oh yeah, I hate what she has to say, but I totally tap that.
And
Because
I think that's some posturing too. You know,
maybe I've seen enough of it that I'm like, and also just guys who are like, oh yeah, they're
I find guys
it
that say things like that deep down are actually terrified of women.
that would make sense
Yeah,
because I
and
mean there is this level of objectification where I'm like, okay, this isn't romantic. This is just pure lust. That doesn't do anything for me, and it's also not going to make me respect a guy because it's like I can obviously talk to guys about I I love pinup art, and I'm all
Yeah.
about. I love Dita Von Teese and burlesque. So it's like, yeah, I can relate to a lot of guys on some of these things. But it gets to a point where the way they start talking, I'm like, no, that's just disrespectful.
Yeah.
That's
And
dehumanizing.
yeah, and I do think that that's a conversation that needs to be had. The problem is the minute you try to have it, there's this immediate trigger and things go way off the rails. And I mean, we've
Yeah.
seen that in the comment section for what, 4-6 weeks now, that there is this vulnerability trigger. With a cat, it's called a challenge threshold. You know that thing where the cat's like, don't do it, don't do it, and the ears flatten and the tail starts going, and don't do it, and whack, right? That's what it feels like to me. Like, what is going on here? The stuff that starts coming out was things we didn't say. They weren't even things we actually implied. It's like it's that Sherlock Holmes comment on Irene Adler, where she was the woman, she was the embodiment of her sex. Like, too often a single woman becomes every woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the thing that has me extremely concerned, because no male character can represent all men and speak for all men, and they shouldn't. And no female character or woman can speak for all women. And yet you see men, and I don't think they even realize they're doing it, making women's opinions fungible. And you point it out to them, and they deny it up and down. Like, I mad respect to that one guy on Feedback Friday where he pointed out that he generalized about women while complaining that women generalize about men. And he actually said in the comics, "You're right. I totally did the thing I was complaining about. I'm going to watch that." Mad respect with that guy. Oh my God, that guy gets so many more chances with me going forward.
And
Like,
that's an extreme a sign of extreme maturity,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
Being able to accept and admit when you were wrong.
yeah, yeah. And
That's extremely attractive, by the way,
well,
guys.
yeah, I was really impressed with that guy, because I never know, because I mean, my socialization, obviously I hang around with a lot of guys, both personally and professionally. My last like group outing was a boys' night, and I'm way more comfortable in a room where I'm the only woman than a room of all women. I know that. Um, and so my socialization is extremely male. And so I'll do that taking the piss. And then there's that really uncomfortable moment where the guy just turns. And it's like, oh, right. He's not hearing me. He's hearing woman. And it's so
Mhm.
upsetting. It is so upsetting, because I can't help that being my natural inclination and my natural sense of humor.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I invite people, lighthearted, making fun of me on certain things like The Sims and all that stuff, right? And it is just that really uncomfortable moment where, wow, you just treated me as interchangeable with a type of human I am not. And if they'd stopped and thought about it for 5 seconds, they'd recognize it was not a smart thing to do, but they're not thinking. And to me, that is on the same spectrum of behavior. And this is a big swing. And I don't know if I'm going to explain this well. But to me, that is on the same continuum of human behavior as the crazy shippers that insist that their headship is canon and freak out if the showrunners don't give it to them. Because, like, no, you can't dictate where a plot line's going to go. A lot of these things are conceived in 3 to 5 year arcs from concept, right? And just because your headcanon, like, that's what fan fiction is for. It's like we're getting the conjunction of the spheres constantly in everything, because so much media plays like fan fiction. People expect to have this, if you want to be able to choose who you romance, go play a video game. Don't expect that from a TV show or a movie. You got to take the movie where it lies, right?
Yeah.
And so many people just know, I want it. And I do think there's a continuum there of yeah, if you can go on some internet database and get exactly what you want, algorithmically curated for your past preferences. So everything is an echo chamber rabbit hole, everything from cat videos to musical sampling to, yeah, your sexual gratification material. It's not, people keep saying it's entitlement. I don't think it's entitlement. It's a lack of openness to new experiences and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
They can't step out of the bubble wrap, because I love
Yeah.
it. I love it when something's fucked up. Like, I'm like, okay, that's so great. I did not see that coming. When it works, it works. And I don't need somebody to be like me for me to relate to them. I would like to see more people like me in media. I would. And it's uncomfortable for me because unfortunately the people who have similar personalities, especially with women, tend to be Black characters, and then I have to be very careful about how I'm coming across.
Yeah.
Right. And it, recognizing that discomfort doesn't mean I just totally ignore the reality. And I think too many people I'm seeing are, we talked about the fact that 8 to 12-year-olds know something's not real.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into these adults, well, they'll tell you something's not real, but the way they're grieving every single change, no, that's only, maybe they don't realize it's real, but they're infusing a lot of meaning in it. And it was really interesting. I went to, do you know what the AVN awards are?
I do not know.
The Adult Video Network Awards.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's the porn awards.
Can
And
I want to make this comment really
right,
quick
okay.
because years ago I saw it was this little meme basically where it was during that trend where it was during that time when the trend in red carpet gowns was the strategically placed lace
Right.
and like the sheer dress that
Right.
showed everything.
Right.
And so someone posted pictures of like Kim Kardashian and a few others in those dresses. And then below it was a picture of some of the women's at you said AVN
Yeah.
Awards, a few of the women at the AVN Awards who were all wearing off the rack dresses.
Yeah.
And the comment was, it's really sad that the porn actresses dress more modestly than the women on red carpets. And I'm like, well, the women on red carpets can afford the tailoring it takes
Oh.
to have those dresses custom made to their body.
Yeah, there's a few things going on there. One is that a lot of porn actresses have really bad keloid scarring because of multiple breast implant removals and replacements.
That too.
We'll see that on those delicate lace dresses. Those delicate lace dresses, I own one jacket with tattoo lace. Nothing else fits. They are cut for a B cup. And if you are any bigger than that, the lace stretches and tears. It's tragic. So they can't wear those dresses, but also it's AVN. Those women, Florence Pugh shows up with visible nipples under a hot pink lace at a film festival. There is an invisible barrier, a shield between her and the general public. Right? At AVN, they're doing autograph signings. They are touching their fan base. And it's the strangest thing. You go in there and it is, you ever been to one of the bigger Comic Cons, like San Diego Comic Con?
No.
Okay, it's sensory overload, right? It's just Blade Runner territory of screens and noise and lights and white noise and people. Now imagine Blade Runner with close-ups of genitalia everywhere. I was actually physically nauseous the first day I was there. And I am not a prude.
Yeah.
It was just too much. It was too many close-ups of, they're called private parts for a reason,
Mm.
and it's one thing for it to be there. It's another thing for it to be that literally in your face.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's going on. And this actress is having, or adult star, they prefer to be called, because they joke people don't pay to see our acting. And I love the self-awareness of these women. It's great. But they'll be sitting there. Well, that is their body. That is playing on a big screen over their shoulder, and they're just having a conversation with a guy. It was the most surreal thing I had ever seen. Top 10 surreal things I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of surreal things. But these women are smart, they're dedicated, they're serious about their work, they want to provide a quality product, but they are chaperoned. They are absolutely chaperoned. They leave nothing to chance, because they know that some people can, and this is where I see most guys are totally fine and respectful, and there's no problems. There's that one person that went in with the brainworms, like we talked about at the beginning of part 1, right? They go in with the brainworms, and the brainworms just grow because you start getting adrenaline and a lot of the pleasure chemicals in the brain mixed with the brainworms, and things start to warp. And I go back to the comparison. There are a lot of warped women who take interdisciplinary studies, right? And their relationship with Disney princesses isn't that different than people who have a really unhealthy relationship with pornography. They're trying to make it do a whole bunch of things it just doesn't do. It won't love you. And instead of going out and forming connections with people, they fall deeper and deeper into their, Cara Lana ship from Supergirl.
Yeah.
And then they explode in rage when that fantasy doesn't become a reality. And it drives people further away. It further isolates them,
Well, you use the example of Kara and Lana. For me, the big example that really exemplifies that is actually Sherlock.
I was going to bring that up and forgot. That was a messed up. I mean, the whole Sherlock phenomenon was awful. I don't know if I've ranted at you about how much I despise that whole thing.
So, do you know about the big conspiracy that there was going to be a secret 4th episode that would actually make the last season good?
Yeah, I know there was a huge freak out of. See, I think that show was actually legit queer baiting. I agree with the fandom on that one. So much of that shit was toxic.
I mean, not at first in like the first season.
No, not at first.
But then they saw the response and they leaned into it so hard.
Yeah.
And they would actively mock the fans. Last night I had the thought, why does Moffat keep making science fiction and sci-fi adjacent shows when his entire run on Doctor Who makes me think he really just wants to be making fantasy?
Because it's what can get greenlit, and fantasy still has a stigma.
Boo.
Yeah, fantasy still has a stigma because it's seen as less serious because of that, hard science fiction, male, fantasy, feminine, even that's not who consumes the stuff, but that's when there is shiny hair, it is taken less seriously as in, smart storytelling. That's why.
Well, I mean,
because I agree, Doctor Who is space fantasy a lot more than sci-fi.
I mean, it's always been space fantasy, but especially I was thinking about like some of Moffat's big episodes, and actually I should have checked if he actually wrote them, but like the whole Amelia Pond and the doctor straight up saying, Amy Pond, no, that's boring. Amelia Pond sounds like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
well, that's probably Mark Gatiss dropping those lines in.
Maybe.
Yeah, he tends to have the better, more whimsical, gayer
Okay.
writing.
so,
Yeah,
so maybe Gaddis is
yeah,
the one
yeah,
who
yeah,
really
yeah.
wants to be making
Gaddis,
fantasy.
sorry, yeah, I mispronounced his name. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it Sherlock was one of those things. It was like you said, they totally leaned into it and they saw the Tumblr fans. They also mocked the Tumblr fans, which is part of why I was like,
Well, that whole
why?
show was literally sociopathic.
And it made a lot of people self-diagnose
Did it as a sociopath?
as a, yeah,
High functioning, because that was it. The first episode,
high functioning
I
sociopath.
knew I was gonna hate the show because Sherlock Holmes in the books, his whole deductive method is perspective taking. He says, I imagine the situation as if I am there, right? That requires a massive degree of empathy. And the reason he's so uncomfortable around women is he doesn't understand the way they think, which is why he always enlists female, like one-off, um what's the word I'm looking, compatriots, like a sort
Mm-hmm.
of assistant for his different adventures, because he needs that perspective. That's what he can't bring to the table.
Yeah.
And the difference between him and Mycroft is he actually gets off his ass and tests his theories, right? But that, to do that, requires a high degree of empathy and connections to human beings. And they actually show him having depressive episodes in the books. He's the farthest thing from a sociopath you can find. But sociopaths are the one mental health condition that isn't a weak man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I also think they went with narcissist with Loki instead of horribly abused child whose daddy never loved him. Either daddy. Like double the daddy issues with that poor guy. But no
Yeah.
trauma. No, can't have trauma. Can't have trauma with the guy who, chewed the scenery with glorious purpose. No, he has to just be a narcissist and let's mock him and torture him for laughs. It's all wrong. But there's that, and the problem is a lot of not great people are involved in these decisions.
Yeah.
And you see that in Sherlock. And I was, the one thing I will give Disney is they'll only let it go so far. They are intensely protective of their IPs,
Yeah.
sometimes to a fault. But the way the BBC just let that show crap on the source material, and then the very same people who are arguing that they're getting the comics wrong defended that show to me. And I'm like, no, man, this isn't the books. This isn't the character. This is some weird, body snatcher claiming to be Sherlock Holmes. This isn't the character.
See, I can't interact with the Conan fandom pretty much at all because I'm a Robert E. Howard purist.
Oh,
And
and they more go from the adaptations.
they a lot of them they know more about the Marvel comics than the actual story, or the
Okay.
Dark Horse comics. But I got into a disagreement. I mentioned something about it on Twitter, and how Thulsa Doom from the first Conan movie is Cole's nemesis
Mm-hmm.
and not Conan's. And someone responded, well, Thulsa Doom, he's immortal, so he could totally show up. And Marvel had this great run where Conan fought Thulsa Doom, and I'm like, I don't care. Howard didn't write it.
And you know what? That's fair. You're allowed to talk about what you're allowed to talk about.
Yeah. And Howard, obviously he didn't get to write a lot of Cole, but like he was fine with bringing elements over. One of his other characters is the Pictish king Bran Morn. I
Mm-hmm.
believe I'm pronouncing it right. And there's a story where Cole shows up out of the mists, because Cole never actually died. Cole
Right.
just wandered into the mists of time at the
That's
end of
right.
the
Yeah,
world.
yeah, yeah.
And so one night, this druid tells Bran Morn, okay, I'm bringing us help lead
Right.
this battle. Colt comes out of the mist. They fight. Colt disappears back into the mist, and I'm like, that was great.
Yeah, he was pulling from like old school Welsh myth on that stuff, and it was fantastic.
Howard, I hate to say Irish fetishist. He had
Yes.
this, he was convinced that the Irish would have become the greatest civilization on earth, but the Vikings forced them to focus on warfare, and so they never evolved properly. And I'm just like, that is so cute.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't mean to sound mocking, but I'm like, I love that. That is adorable.
No, it's cool when, because I mean that's again, it's vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
It's a theory he has to know some people are going to find ridiculous,
Yeah.
and that I don't think you can have intimacy without vulnerability. And the thing that is great about those original Conan novels is the way things just hang there, right?
Yeah.
If that's, if that's your jam, I understand why you don't like Bathos, because it's the opposite, right? Like things
Yeah.
just hang, like you don't even need the slow-mo. The pace of the whole thing is there's gravitas,
Yes.
right? And there is that uh lilt that whenever you throw anything Irish or Welsh inspired in, when you start dealing with the folk,
Mhm.
you the hulking brutes stuff that you get with a lot of the Conan adaptation, it I think people would benefit from going back and reading some of the original source material, because it really isn't that.
And I don't think the Schwarzenegger movies would bother me so much if that wasn't what everyone latched
Yeah,
onto and
yeah.
what everyone knew. Because you mentioned Conan, and if someone actually knows it, they're gonna give you the whole "what is best in life to crush your enemy." No, no, no,
Yeah,
no, no. I
yeah.
hate that line
I hate that line too.
because when they made Conan stupid, and
Yeah.
I get that it was because Schwarzenegger couldn't speak English,
Right.
but that's when you hire Sylvester Stallone or something.
Or you dub them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's Conan is not stupid, and also this is something that pisses me off so much. You cannot put someone in slavery for 20 years and claim they're a barbarian.
That's right.
Those two things cannot coexist. But so Conan, when he was like 17 or 19, he first came down from the he first came down from Samaria into the cities. He sat in the temples and listened to the philosophers
That's right.
and said, wow, these people talk too much about stuff they have no idea. And I heard that line and I'm like, I love you.
Yeah.
Get it? Because that's one of my biggest things is people talk so much and they have no idea what they're saying.
Yeah.
But Conan's philosophy on life is not crush your enemies, see them driven. No, it's I eat, I slay, I love, I am content.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I love that so much. And it's like that Howard, I love Howard is my favorite author, period. And I will never stop defending him. But
Yeah.
it's just that that's that barbarian prince thing. And along with that line about from later in his life when it said his girls had never known a harsh touch. I'm like, can I be one of his girls? I don't even have to
Well,
be Queen Zenobia. Can I just be one of the girls?
yeah, and that's that, what the dreamer tendency that they found with, the fact that 8-year-olds need an escape from the harshness of life. Holy shit, but I'm glad they're getting it, right? And
Yeah.
and that's the stuff that when we dismiss, and I said earlier, you have the right to talk about, you're allowed to talk about what you're allowed to talk about. That is something that has been lost, and I think it's this histamine response almost to the discourse, to these think pieces, that everybody talks like they're a cable news pundit. I shouldn't say everybody, but The
So
people
many
that
people.
so many people talk like they're cable news pundits now, instead of people having a conversation to swap ideas,
Yeah.
right? And it drives me crazy because I see it so many times that I retweeted this thing from Ice-T, where he said basically social media in a nutshell, I prefer mangoes to papaya. Why do you hate pineapple? It's
Yes.
it's making the conversation about something it was never intended to be about. And
It's so
then,
reductive.
well, it's also in it's I'm trying to find the word here. It is showing the other person zero respect, right? Because it's not
Mhm.
about, and the number of people I've said, okay, that's another point, that's not what I was talking about, and they say, but it's what I want to talk about. And I immediately lose all interest in talking to this person because these things are not unilateral. When someone starts off, you follow along the conversation the other person has started. You don't hijack the conversation into what you want to talk about. And I do think that that is something that could be improved if people became aware of why it's bad,
Mhm.
right? But when everything, I think, that thing we talked about before with the participation trophy,
Mhm.
I think the consumption of media now has become its own participation trophy, right? Because when you can just jump to another piece of completely free media with one click, and you can mash a dislike button and you can leave a nasty comment, and you have all this perceived control over what you're consuming, and you get this increasing need for it to be exactly what you wanted, and never meet it on its terms. I think there is some expectation drift when that's their primary way of entertaining themselves,
Mhm.
right? When everything is so perceived to be personalized, but really not, right?
Mhm.
It's not offering you something new that you're going to like. It's just offering you more and more of the stuff that you already liked. People start losing the ability to be open-minded to new things and new perspectives. And then they don't understand why they're getting all these negative reactions from other people. And anybody observing the conversation is, well, you totally hijacked the conversation, you acted like an asshole. Oh, but I didn't mean to. But you did.
Mhm.
Like, yes, you did mean to change the subject. You were totally aware it's what I want to talk about. And people call that entitlement, but I don't think it is. I think people are so desperate for validation because what they found is that combination of, parents demanding performance, and then that praise, that empty praise culture that
Mhm.
started about 5 years below me in school. I didn't grow up in praise culture. People failed stuff back
Mhm.
when, and it wasn't the constant good job. It was kind of the opposite. We were always told the boomers aren't going to retire, there's going to be no work for you, get used to it, you're screwed. No kidding.
Mhm.
That was like, we heard that quite a bit, especially in 10th grade geography. For some reason, I have no idea why. But when people keep hearing good job, good job, good job, when they're not hearing it, there's a vacuum. And they
Yeah.
actually did find that it doesn't land anymore, that people know it's empty.
Here's the thing. So there's been this. It's not that I have a problem with this all girls are beautiful message.
Right.
It's just that I don't actually trust anyone when they tell me I'm beautiful, because I'm like, okay, would you say that to anyone, or does it actually mean something with me?
See, and this is where good compliments are so important, right? Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure if somebody said, I really like the way you did your hair, or, complimented something specific,
Yes.
that would be different.
Yes.
Right.
And, most of the time, admittedly, when I hear that, it's from women. Like my mom
I
will
think
introduce me to
because
someone and they'll be like, "Oh, she's so beautiful." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't know if you mean that or not, but okay."
I think because men are afraid to come across as creepy.
So here's the thing. You did a while back, you did a Manly Monday video. I think it was on dating or something,
Yeah.
or specifically on giving compliments. And I responded to a comment and I was just trying to point out the difference that it's like, I've had guys who'll be like, "Hey, you look nice." And it's like they're leering at my
Yeah.
chest and they've just got this kind of half smirk. And it's
Yeah.
like they could be attractive, but I'm like,
You're a
ew,
pig. Yeah.
you're gross. Leave me alone.
I
Whereas, like, if an average guy, I had a guy at one point, I walked by him and he said, "Hey, ma'am, you're killing it," and gave me a hang 10 sign.
mhm,
I think it's hang 10.
right.
But that meant a lot to me because it's like that wasn't leering, that was
Right.
looking at me overall.
Yeah.
And it's like there was some appreciation there, but it's like it didn't matter to me that he was older and less attractive. It just mattered that it wasn't leering
There was
and
no
it wasn't
expectation.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like you don't have to be attractive. And that was part of the comment I was responding to is it's like, well, women only like compliments from attractive guys. No,
That's
it's
ridiculous.
it's I want to feel like you're actually seeing me as a person and not just objectified
Well,
or as an object of desire.
I actually came up with a 3-point plan for effective compliments. An effective compliment, because someone told me you need a Cliff Steele method of apology. I'm stupid, I'm fucked up, I'm sorry, for compliments. And I'm like, okay, so a proper compliment has an acknowledgement a woman has a face, recognition of her as a whole person, and appreciates effort put in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one compliment I always love is I love your lipstick
Yep.
or your makeup looks good.
Because you applied that.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're looking at your face.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it takes it away from that idea of intrinsic worth, but also every woman is aware beauty fades, physical beauty
Yeah.
fades, right?
Yeah.
And I really don't think any woman, even though we navigate it and even though we do things to, up our odds in a world obsessed with physical appearance, we don't like, I think it's not so much that we don't like there are some things that are just not attractive. I think it's more, at least for me, I know I sincerely find a greater a greater range of things attractive than what's validated in media.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I remember, and I mentioned this on Twitter, so I think you saw it. I remember seeing. I used to flip through men's magazines
yeah.
just out of curiosity, and seeing one. It was an advice column where they said, well, men tend to all like the same things in women. We're lucky that women like different types of men.
Right.
And I was kind of like, well, fuck you too.
And I mean that's really not true
and
in my
that's
experience.
what I've discovered.
Yeah.
But that really upset me at the time because it's like
Oh yeah.
I know what the standardized male attraction is. It's tan, it's skinny, it's
Yep.
athletic, it's usually
Yep.
dark hair or blonde.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
it's
Yep.
I am none of those things.
Well, and
And
let's face it, quiet and submissive too.
I mean, I am quiet and submissive. So
Yeah, no matter how much I try to be quiet, the problem is I care about ideas too much.
yeah.
And I do want to engage, and it's really frustrating when that gets misconstrued. Passion gets misconstrued as aggression
Yeah.
so much. And that really, first of all, what's wrong with aggression? That's the thing that drives me crazy about the whole Harley Quinn thing, right? Women identify with Harley Quinn. Men have this really messed up relationship with Harley Quinn. I know this isn't right, but whenever a guy's a Harley Quinn fanboy, I take a wider berth.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
It's
I
because it comes back to like it would be one thing if they were like, yeah, I'm really fascinated by her mental break and how she came from being this professional career doctor, psychologist woman to becoming a psychopath. Um, but
well,
even like, okay, that probably means you like broken women. That's a red flag. But
it's not that they don't like broken women. They want to dominate broken women because they're the first ones to complain that, oh, she did this and she falsely accused me. And I'll say, you stuck your dick in crazy. What did
yeah,
you think was going to happen? Oh, you thought it was going to be the fantasy of this, manic pixie dream girl turbo slut that was just going to be wild in bed and you wouldn't have to call her. That was the appeal. And they get real offended by that and start defending the position instead of going, no, that's not what I thought.
which is kind of funny because one of Harley's biggest struggles is she won't leave Mr. J alone.
Well,
Like,
that's the thing. I don't know why they think that these women will take rejection well. Most of them have BPD. It's the opposite,
I mean,
right?
I feel like every episode I've seen of Batman the Animated Series with Harley is she's trying to get the Joker to give her attention and she's being demanding and he has to like literally throw her out on the street because darn it, he's trying to work.
Well, there's different Harleys, right? There's the
True.
Harley in the animated series, which is exactly that,
Yes.
right? Which was never intended to be. I thought it was sort of bringing in the annoying younger sister kind of thing because it was a kids cartoon with an adult edge,
I
right? It was
mean,
an all ages thing. You saw what you wanted to see in it.
I mean, her jokes were still mostly, "Hey, Puddin, want some pudding?" and "Don't you want to rev up your Harley?"
Yeah.
So I'm like, for me, it's like the sexual context is hard to miss.
Well, that's the thing. But if you're 6, you're not picking up that sexual
True,
context, right? And I like
true.
that, right? I was talking to somebody about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and because he quoted on Twitter, he's like, I won't believe it. I won't believe it. I can't believe it. I shan't believe it. And I immediately fired back instinctively, believe it, kid. I took the pictures myself, And I said, I can't believe how that movie ingrained in my memory. And of course, that was the she played patty cake,
Of
not like
course.
Jessica, like that whole thing. And that you didn't get the sexual subtext of that when you were a kid.
I did actually.
Oh,
Like,
that's
I remember
interesting.
seeing it for the first time when I was like 5 or 6. It was on TV. And they're talking about patty cake. And I'm like, do they mean he was playing with her boobs?
Okay, that's even tamer than what it actually means, though. Because
Probably.
that was a hiding the salami type thing. Of course, it was literally them playing patty cake, right?
True.
And that's if you take a littler interpretation, no, it was exactly what they were saying. The adult innuendo, like I like stuff like that. That
Yeah.
doesn't harm a child, right? Nowadays, people would go, "Oh my, that's grooming children." No, it's not. No, it is not. And that's not fair to parents because that creates utterly sexless adult relationships where everything's extremely child focused and adults don't model getting their emotional and physical needs met. That's a
Yeah.
problem. We don't want that. We want children raised in homes that have loving, committed, supportive relationships with a physical component where kids are taught, get the emotional element first. Find somebody you like, find somebody you can spend time with, and then take the physical step.
And I think that's also a huge disadvantage to, there's this thing where parents cannot stand the idea of talking about sex with their children.
Well, because
And
they're afraid they're going to be judged by their parents, I think.
I get that, but I also think that that's part of what leads to this we can't talk about it, but we're all obsessed with it.
Oh, agreed.
And even growing up in the church, I was at the time where I was in, the big trend of, the purity ring and
Oh,
abstinence
wow.
vows and father-daughter dances and all this. And they would there was this one system that was being promoted where it's like, okay, well, you go on a road trip with your kid and you play this tape or whatever, and they learn about purity and abstinence and everything, and then you
Wow.
don't have to say anything. And I'm like, that is so fucked up. And specifically the person promoting it was like, you can just sit there blushing and trying not to look at them. And I'm like, why not just be honest? It's we are not in Victorian times anymore. It's 2022. Well, it was like 2020, 2010 at this point.
Yeah.
2005, whatever. But it's like, just be honest. And if you are exemplifying a relationship that is, I hesitate to say displaying a sexual relationship, but like not being gross or
It's
exhibitional.
affectionate. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yes, but
affectionate.
it's
It's
like,
affection. Yeah.
yeah, and there's no secret that it's happening. They don't
Mm-hmm.
need details, but just aware that like it's an aspect of the relationship. It's a healthy part of it.
Right.
And being able to talk to kids so that they know they can talk to you. They know
Right.
it's not embarrassing instead of listening to what their 10-year-old friend found on the internet.
Yeah. Or getting their concept of sex from porn.
Yes.
Because that's not what porn's intended to do.
No. And it's the same with romance novels. But I also see, I mean, both romance novels and porn are criticized for being unrealistic. I would say porn is a lot more unrealistic generally because,
I just think if for me, if there isn't an element of realistic human behavior, it can be an
yeah.
absolutely absurd situation. But the human element has to feel believable to me. Then it's not good. It's not going to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reason I despise Sylvie with Loki. Like she's 1,500 years old. He's 900 and something, and they're faffing around with puppy love and holding hands like 8-year-olds. Like
Thor and Jane were more serious.
But I mean, what's going on here? First of all, we've talked before about the level of emotional stunting on Asgard, but it's Odin's fault. So that, okay, explain. But here's this guy, he's 900 years old. He's been mind controlled, he's been beaten, he's been locked up, he's had all these experiences, and he's never been in love. And he falls in love in about 6 minutes because he had one heart to heart with a tsundere chick. It doesn't make any sense.
But I mean, a lot of Hollywood and their depiction of relationships at this point, it's very, we're going to show this thing.
Yeah.
And you are supposed to understand that this means something.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the whole Whedon era of Marvel, right? Where Nat and Bruce happened off screen. And Wanda and Vision happened off screen. And I don't think there's any mystery as to why Joss Whedon wouldn't go there. The guy's a malignant narcissist, but who believes that women just have this power over men. Like, that's terrifying, right? When you look at what he poured into Black Widow, that that is the Whedon ideology, that no matter how much you beat her, abuse her, tie her up, humiliate her, no matter how much she self-harms, she's always in control. That's disgusting. It's not true. And that, I have had guys lecture me as to why that's brilliant. It's like, there is no woman on the planet, there's no person on the planet who is always in control.
Mm-hmm.
No one is that canny a manipulator. But also think about how terrifying, like, Natasha wouldn't believe she's a monster because she doesn't have a functioning universe. She'd believe she was a monster because she manipulates men so easily.
Yeah.
Like, that, the writing was just so terrible there. And again, I mean, they never really get into it in Marvel Comics, which I think why it's a bit of a punt with Wanda and Vision. But the way they handled it with them is, I was left feeling like Wanda, I'm left with the feeling that Wanda ended up falling in quote unquote love with Vision because she didn't really see him as a man, and so she found him safe. And I'm left really unsettled by that feeling.
Yeah.
Because, what does he do? He took care of her. He rescued her. Do we ever see them having a serious conversation as equals? No, we never do. We get that cute moment where Bruce talks about Nat singing him a lullaby once, which is adorable. We don't get that with Wanda and Vision. It's he's a tool. He's wine mom porn for her.
Mm-hmm.
All she cares about is those fucking children, which she doesn't really care about. And this is supposed to be some, she's play pretending the whole thing. And they never really have yet dealt with how truly horrific that is, and how women like that, she's a bigger red flag than Harley by far, because Harley's somewhat self-aware about how messed up she is. I mean, that's why that one scene, that one scene in James Gunn's Suicide Squad was so good. Where after that whole, have you seen that movie yet?
Mm-mm.
They do this whole ridiculous parody of romance where the local warlord is going to marry Harley, and he wines and dines her and everything like that. And she ends up brutally murdering him. And she does this monologue, and Margot Robbie kills the scene where she does a monologue where she talks about how she tends to fall for men who are bad for her. And I'm like, wow, this was really heavy-handed. I'm like, where the hell is this going? But that scene at least seemed to understand the character. And even though I think you could remove Harley from that movie entirely and nothing would be lost, she really seemed like an add-on. At least James Gunn put in one scene that made me feel like he actually understood this bloody character.
Yeah. And that's why the Harleen comic worked so well for me. Like, I'm one of those people, I'm sick of Harley at this point.
There's two Harleys, right? Well, sorry, there's three. I said there's the one from Batman Animated Series. There's the Harley Ivy Harley that Paul Dini kind of spun off.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the psychotic, really messed up, that where they redid her costume, Suicide Squad Harley from the comics. Yeah.
There's roller derby.
Harley. Yeah. And that seems to be the one that's taking over, and she's my least favorite one.
And that's what's so frustrating. And that's part of why I liked the Stephen Sage runs.
Yeah.
Stephen Sage run so much was, it's, you see the Joker manipulating her,
Mm-hmm.
and you find out he knows exactly what the study she's doing on him is.
Oh, interesting. Oh, so they did sort of a similar thing to the Arkham games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where he had an insider in the staff who brought him the papers, so he saw what she was working on, and then he could feed her the exact lines. But
okay.
she was already primed in the fact that she saw Batman beating up the Joker, and she was horrified by it. And
Well,
so she started to see Joker as the victim.
and in her original origin, she slept her way through school. She wasn't actually qualified. So she was easy prey.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think
And
is a good detail because it explains a lot.
yeah. And Cedric did deal with that one as well, where specifically she slept with, he reduced it to, she slept with one professor and it was found out. And so
Yes.
people were like, oh, well, they were judging her for it. And so she felt she had something to prove.
Right.
And I mean,
Oh, that's an interesting retelling of that. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah. And her whole theory, oh gosh, I haven't read it in a while, so I don't remember exactly what it was basically like socialized compassion.
Right.
Or lack thereof or something.
Right.
So, I mean, Sage is my second favorite author after Howard. So it's like, obviously, I get passionate about any of his stuff as well.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a thought out premise, right?
Yes.
And I'd rather a thought out retelling than something that just completely sticks to canon, because it goes back to that thing I'm talking about, where I talked about before, where when things are too comfortable, when everything's exactly the way you want it, you lose resilience and you lose the ability to enjoy the curveballs that get thrown at you. And I do think that, let's face it, superheroes are Disney princesses for boys.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I wasn't even surprised when Disney bought Marvel, because for years I'd been going, why didn't they develop something for boys? Like, you've cornered the market for girls.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you have anything? Why isn't there a Disney Prince line?
Well, yeah,
for the boys?
Because they had that Disney XD channel.
Yes.
That was aimed at boys, but
I'm so glad I'm not the only one who knew that.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I've never really talked to anyone about it, but watching the two myself, I started to notice, oh, this one's very boy centric, this one's girl centric.
Oh no, that was by design. The Disney XD was supposed to be for 8 to 12-year-old boys, and that's why everything was pointless, running around and yelling. Because there was that period where they wanted absolutely zero morals or educational content, and that's why people go, Disney's woke. No, I did friggin' meetings with all these damn animation companies. Any sort of message, you were done. They didn't want it.
I think Disney XD might actually have done better if they had done something like Disney Princes, but like knights. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I like knights. And
the problem is, at the time, when this is very inside Hollywood, but at the time they were building Disney XD, and I think you're right, the reason it didn't work is that they thought kids only wanted stories about kids, that they didn't want stories about adults. Adult world was not desirable.
And I have never understood that, because so many of the popular stories for kids from the 80s, like, okay, so we had the She-Ra reboot on Netflix a few years ago, and they reduced her age.
Yeah.
So she's 13. And people kept making this, you had fans of the old one who were like, but we love the old She-Ra design.
Yeah.
Well, that's super sexual, and this is a 12-year-old. Are you saying you want to sexualize a 12-year-old? No.
And I don't know how anybody says that the old She-Ra design was super sexual.
I mean, she looks like Barbie.
It's a figure skating costume.
I know.
Well, but I mean, the trope back then, they said, we want 4 kids in a backyard. That's what they kept saying, 4 kids in a backyard.
Oh, so that's how we got the backyardigans.
Oh yeah, they kept saying 4 kids in a backyard. That was the industry shorthand for what to pitch, 4 kids in a backyard.
I mean, even Hannah Montana almost fits that.
Yeah.
Because almost everything happened in her house at this little spot on the beach.
Part of it,
that set was tiny.
Part of it is that they knew how much money they could reasonably bring in on these extended cable services. And so, you couldn't have a whole bunch of characters, maximum 4 to 6, you know, reused backgrounds. It was all economies of scale. But the problem is that it led to an entire generation that did not strive, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't, I want to go on adventures. It was, I want to pass tests. And so while girls are going, I want adventure in the great wide somewhere,
That's
boys
the
are,
exact lyric I was thinking.
yeah, boys are, I need to pass a test and I need to get a degree and I need to get a job and I need to get a girlfriend and then I need to get married so I can have a kid. Like, you see, it's all box checking, right?
And
It's all
even
performance
the
review.
Hercules movie fits that.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
Yeah.
I will go the distance.
Yeah. Well, even Princess and the Frog was get a job. The
I
message to
hate
boys.
it, for girls too, in a way. And that's part of why I hated that movie. Because I'm like, don't tell me to work. I hear that in real life. That's not why I'm here.
The thing I didn't like about the Princess and the Frog was that the music was shockingly subpar for the setting.
Yeah.
That's what blew me away in a bad way about that movie. But again, it was Black people, so nobody knew what to do. It was all set pieces and messaging, not telling a story. And I do think, I mean, there's credible evidence right now that boys are falling behind. But
Yeah.
my belief in, and this is based on the data I'm reading, because the idea doesn't make any sense that all of a sudden boys can't sit still. All of a sudden boys can't, you know, that's so undervaluing the impulse control of young men, right? Educational systems were designed for boys. That's malarkey. Not the word I want to use, but malarkey's a funny word.
And
What it
I think part of the problem is that there's not enough happening outside of school.
Well, this is where I'm going to. Boys aren't encouraged to dream the way
Yes.
girls are, right? The fact that we're juxtaposing Disney princesses and porn, right? And I do think that the superheroes gave, and not even, right? I thought up until recent kerfuffles that superheroes were what gave boys permission to dream, because I know superheroes is what gave me position to dream, because with Disney princesses I'm like, I'm not that. Boys think I'm another boy. I'm not going to have this story, you know, no cool fuzzy guy is going to fall madly in love with me. So what am I going to do? Well, these other guys seem pretty cool, you know. This is something I can build on, and I was able to build what I wanted out of those stories of, okay, this seems appealing, this doesn't. And I thought guys related to male superheroes the same way I did. This is so weird, right? Because I'm like, yeah, Captain America is a story of a guy who was too physically undesirable. He got 4A'd, right? He got 4A'd out of military service, and the super soldier serum came along. And to me, that was the seize the opportune moment message, right? Like, don't think you can't do great things just because you're not a guy with muscles. There are other ways to become a superhero. And I loved the Marvel What If with Captain Britain, that even though Steve didn't get the super soldier serum, he still found a way to be a hero through the War Machine suit. That's what I took away from that story. And guys were like, she cucked him, she took over, she erased him. And I'm like, are we watching the same damn piece of media? You know, have they forgotten Bruce Banner? Bruce Banner himself is a mentally ill physicist. He's not a guy with muscles, right? And he still manages to have all these adventures. Ant-Man ain't buff. But it's so weird what men filter out of these stories, where I'm like I said, it's like, who do I want to play Xbox with regarding Thor, you know? Because I wanted to be Meek on that couch eating pizza with Thor. That seemed cool to me. You know, the fact that it was, what was it, friggin' Fortnite they were playing? It was just so
Oh God.
you know, because he was depressed and trying to hide it. But I'm like, okay, that's where I'd fit. Because a guy like Thor, I'm Darcy, a guy like Thor is never going to give me the time of day. And instead of being depressed about that, I'm going to find a way that, you know, it's still good. I can still fit in this story. But it seems like guys who claim to love this stuff don't do that process. They don't see themselves in Daredevil. They don't see themselves in Bruce Banner. You know, they see themselves as the creepy guy outside the sports bar. And that is a choice, you know?
Yeah.
That is a choice. And it's and these are the people that insisted that every other type of people should be able to see themselves in male heroes, and they themselves aren't seeing themselves in male heroes when it counts. And that comes from somewhere, right? And I think it comes from, we have ignored that we haven't been giving that I want adventure in the Great Ride Somewhere message to boys outside of video games. I mean, The Legend of Zelda has picked up a lot of slack in that regard.
Mm-hmm,
but
definitely.
Video games have been so demonized that, well, so was Disney princesses, but I guess in a different way.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just so they don't see the issue with every female body type in media essentially being very, very close to each other up until very recently, right? We're supposed to recognize it's not real. We're supposed to watch around it. But we see now how the lack of resilience is starting to show when men get put to that treatment. And it's not their fault, right? It's not their fault. It's that there is no Star Wars, to me, was the male Disney princess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that anymore. Luke Skywalker is a male Disney princess.
Yes.
He's perfect. He is the male Disney princess. Mark Hamill, if he's hearing this, he's laughing right now because he'd probably agree. But he's probably not listening. But
a girl can dream.
You know, I've met Mark multiple times. He's a super nice guy. But he is the Disney princess, right? He starts in a little town in the quiet village, and then he has an adventure to Great White Somewhere. Right. And then it turns out that he's actually part of this much bigger thing, so on and so forth. He is both a born hero and a made hero. Yes, he has inherent specialness, but it's not just power, it is his character. Yeah. And I do think Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson fit, and Thor fit into that as well. But what I don't get is why I see this, and when I bring it up, you see this instantly, but guys aren't seeing this.
I don't know.
And that's when I get to the porn socialization thing, which is why we're talking porn and princesses. Because, you know, what's porn traditionally? The guy is sort of a proxy prop, where it's the actress really performing for the viewer with some interchangeable, disposable guy. I mean, the Ron Jeremy era, no, it was, hey, look at this guy who's disgusting screwing this hot chick. But now it's the guys are extremely interchangeable. They don't make as much money as the women because they're not the stars. You know, the male adult performers are not the household names that the women are. And so there is no identification with the men in this media. And when this is the way men explore the opposite sex, you know, with the caveat off the top, I said that, no, you go in with brainworms, right? People raised in nurturing environments don't have this problem.
And I almost wonder if, you say Luke is the Disney princess. And then we see where The Last Jedi took him.
Exactly. That's why people had such a bad reaction to it.
And so it's like, even though at the end of Return of the Jedi, Luke didn't get the girl, at least in the books, he got Mara. He got the hot redhead who tried to kill him. And, he was able to convince her. It's a woman who also had a relationship with Lando Calrissian.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Guys claim to love those stories, but Luke put in effort, man. Like the number of these stories where, and yes, they're for women, and I do think this is female wish fulfillment, that and this is what I thought. Yes, I'm going to bring up She-Hulk, but this is sort of the toxic femininity I thought She-Hulk touched on with Josh, and people missed, because that's the thing, right? You reject the guy, he keeps going. You reject the guy, he keeps going. It's Clark Kent. It's Peter Parker, so on and so forth. He just keeps trying, right? I mean, that was Stanley writing about his real life, which is why there was so much life in it. But when women insist on that, they are vulnerable to the Joshes of the world, right? Because there's a certain point where it's not reasonable to expect a guy to just keep coming back. And if he does, he's bad news.
Yeah.
And that's what was so brilliant about that episode. And it's why I'm like, what do you mean that's bad writing? That's telling women, no, this is not a healthy thing to want. Jen Walters isn't healthy. Jen Walters, you get the sense, she probably was one of those people who consumed Disney princess content to take her away from her shitty, awful family.
And I think there may be the situation where, in the last few years, we have, as feminism has become this big trend, and we've seen this girl power. We've seen all these women are always right. All this women are always right messaging.
See, I've missed that somehow. And
I
maybe because I primarily play video games and don't watch this stuff. I don't know. I missed that. I take your word for it that it's there. I just missed it.
So part of it is like, we've talked about how Captain Marvel behaved like a villain in her first movie.
Yeah.
Blasting the guy when he's like, okay, one-on-one. And it is that kind of villainous behavior and just her attitude, in my opinion. But the Force is female, and that kind of messaging. And so I think when we got to She-Hulk and where Jen is saying things
that are intended to make her look like an asshole.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they assume that's on purpose, and it's saying that it's her right to be an asshole, basically. And one thing I see is people saying, "Oh, well, she didn't change, or she didn't learn better." And I'm like, "Yes, she did. They didn't." The thing is, it wasn't stated outright. The changes that happened were a bit more nuanced. And I think we've gotten to the point where people aren't looking at nuance, and they're not seeing the subtlety in the story. Now, I agree. I did not necessarily like when she's like, "Oh, bring back Daredevil. A girl has needs." Because there was a part of me that's like, if Daredevil said that about her.
Oh, I agree that you could not, but I don't believe that you can't interchange certain lines.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's the Guybrush Threepwood paradox, right? You can't have a female character as incompetent as the lead from the Monkey Island games. It would just never fly.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, what I liked about it is she's still kind of a mess at the end. And
yeah, and I think
it's also a comedy. None of it is intended to be taken that heavily.
That's the other thing, is it's not that deep, bro.
Right.
It's really not. And I look at something like Fleabag, which again I haven't watched. I watched a very in-depth review.
Okay. Okay.
But part of the story arc there is that, after her mother died, her father started giving her and her sister books on feminism.
Right.
And they go to these lectures on it and they feel like bad feminists because they aren't performing well.
Yeah, that was a cool part of the show.
And I think a lot of people, and I think that's part of it, is there is all this pressure. We get so much conflicting pressure where it's like we get women who feel like they have to be feminists, or women who feel like they have to have it all and they have to be the girl boss, and
Yeah.
you have to have a career. And I think that really alienates women who, like, I was thinking yesterday, it's like, look, I just want to be a stay-at-home wife, and I want to, like, churn butter and bake bread and make dinner and clean. But, like, when it comes to the dinner, I also want, like, the fancy dinner parties where we discuss philosophy for hours.
And that, well, I mean, that's the challenging thing, right? Because that's not, I'd be interested in seeing media about that, because on paper, yeah, that's totally fair. That is an incredibly difficult thing to get, right?
Yeah.
Because what you end up getting when there's a sole breadwinner is a husband that's incredibly checked out at home.
Yeah. And that's why I like Jessica Rabbit so much, is
Yeah,
because she was the one who showed me that you can have both sides.
right.
And so there are women who it's like they want to have the career and they want to work. And I think we just need to be more honest that it's like, okay, you're going to make a choice one way or the other, but you shouldn't be pressured to do one thing. And like you said, there's the issue of the single breadwinner and the checkout, and there has to be a better way to do it. I just haven't figured out how.
Well,
Yeah.
it's communication, right? And that's exactly what they don't show, which is why I keep going back to, I want to see how these couples got together. I want to see why it works. I want to see the dynamic, for all people complain about She-Hulk, I get what Matt Murdock sees in Jen. He likes crazy self-destructive women. They established that with Elektra. It's a perfect pairing. It makes sense. He's got taste up the ass, right? Because Jen doesn't deserve it. Just Jen doesn't deserve a guy that good right now.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt's Catholic. That's a joke. He likes being tortured and punished, feeling guilty. But it makes sense in his character. You absolutely see, based on her story, why she's attracted to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he does appreciate her, and that's all I want. I
And that's
just,
the fantasy of it, isn't it?
well, except for me, that's more something that I can see reflected, right? That people who aren't perfect, people who are quirky, because this is the other thing, people are so fixated on criticism and working on their faults, and that is a great way to go insane.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, you have to sort of go, okay, this thing, I'm never going to be the best at this thing. I am going to play to my strengths as opposed to trying to cover up my weaknesses, because that's a better, you have to min max at some point in life, right? You have to play to your character class. And I wasted so many years trying to be likable and nice and take every bit of criticism and respond and show that I could handle it. And it didn't get me anywhere. It just got me spinning my wheels. It just got me passed over, because I was always the person who would eat the shit, claim I liked it, and come back for more. And so I stopped doing it. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of nasty comments about that. And that means people aren't accepting the message. But, you know, that's why I wanted to juxtapose sort of a very male space in pornography. And yes, we sort of danced around it because of YouTube, but, and then the whole Disney princess thing, and show the different fantasies and sort of where the traps are, and where the, you know, the potential, you know, maybe if we got more stuff below the waist with women's content and stopped worrying so damn much about safeguarding. Oh my God, am I sick of that word? And gave men more of the adventure in the great wide somewhere, right? And it's funny because the call to adventure used to be the thing, right? That used to be the hero's journey. And now it just seems to be these stories where it starts midpoint. And for all the complaints about the training sequence, right? You really don't see that in the newer male superhero stories. It's all kind of story already in progress. They're already, you know, their power is either like, that's the thing that drove me crazy about the first Doctor Strange movie. Like he mangles his hands, spends what, a few weeks learning to make magical circles.
Yeah.
And he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. That's not earning it.
No.
Like that what is that bullshit? Like, that's terrible. That's not even what happened in the comics. The sense of time was much greater in the comics.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously the whole you know, camouflage thing wasn't as obvious right off the bat and all that stuff. But I mean, swapping out and making Wong the guy in charge makes a lot more sense, because Doctor Strange jumping the line that way. I do think that a lot of guys, I talk to a ton of guys who are having existential crises when they turn 30 because they don't have everything all figured out.
I mean, I'm 31 the day after tomorrow, and I get it.
Well, it's the messaging is there, right? And like, trust me, you know, I got called grandma this week. 44.
I saw that.
Like
that conversational exchange was bizarre.
Well, I like sharing those because I want people to see that those things are real, and the complete lack of self-awareness. So first of all, just because you think you've been wronged doesn't mean you wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And like, there was a guy that completely lost track of the conversation. He had no awareness of how negative he came in from the start, you know, being incredibly critical. It's like, I'm sorry, who are you? What have you published? You know, how are you an authority on writing? Okay. Right. But, you know, he said something that was way, like, hilariously out of bounds, didn't own it, and has absolutely no idea why what happened to him happened. And the problem with those guys is they're pitiable. And I'm going to get nasty comments for that if they're still listening. But it's true. It's true. Those guys are not angering. They're pitiable, because they're going to stay there because they have no pathway to better. They have no way to improve themselves. The tools just aren't there. And that's a solvable problem. The problem is some people like that, and there are women that are lost for very similar reasons. You know, Harley Quinn is an example. She's lost. She's never going to stand on her own. She's had so many chances at that point. She's the kind of woman who ends up in a bad way. Yeah. But we have to start doing better. And instead of blaming women for what's happening to men and blaming men for what's happening to women, I do think we have to look at, you know, compare and contrast what systems for men are doing, what works, what doesn't, what systems for women are doing, what works, what doesn't, and start borrowing from each one, which is, of course, what the feminist writers in the 40s through the 60s were saying. And for some odd reason, we have lost sight of that.
Because we think we're supposed to be so much more intellectual now, I guess.
And I think you're right. And the problem is that you can't be intellectual if you deny your feelings.
Yeah.
Because feelings happen faster than thoughts. You have to, how do I put this? You have to acknowledge, accept, and process your feelings in order to be able to think clearly. If you try to skip steps, you're going to be that guy who called me grandma.
And one thing I've been thinking as we've talked is people aren't thinking, they're reacting.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's a huge disadvantage to conversation nowadays.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said earlier, the whole thing about, I put up an idea on Twitter. Somebody comes at me with a tangent. That's nice. That's not what I was talking about, but it's what I want to talk about. No, that is not how you have a conversation.
No.
That is not how you have a conversation. That's a perfect way. That's about the fastest way I can think of to have somebody not want to talk to you, other than like outright verbal abuse.
Because it's extremely disrespectful.
And it shows you can't share.
And also, can I say, I really think we lost something when we gave up on etiquette. Because it's like we've gotten to this point where people are just like, oh, well, being nice is fake, or just suck it. And I'm just like, and when I say etiquette, I'm not even talking about which fork to use at dinner. I'm just talking about respecting people enough.
I just think too much Batman, and people hate it because what does Batman do? How does Batman solve a problem? A villain comes up, a villain comes up, does something. Batman solves the problem by beating the ever-loving tar out of the guy. Yeah. Violence, anger, brooding, explosive rage. He's got all this money and he beats up petty street thugs on the weekend. And, instead of Captain America, who's Mr. I can do this all day.
Yeah.
Mr. asking, well, that's Steve Rogers. Sam Wilson is, let's ask questions instead of offering my opinion. Let's ask questions. Mm-hmm. Right. And I love that about Sam. I love that because it's so tuned to his voice. It's crap. He didn't have answers. Sometimes the best thing you can do is recognize you don't have the answers, that you're not the ones to supply them, and implore on the people whose job it is to solve those problems to do their jobs so that you can do yours. You don't have to be an expert on everything.
I miss that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people shouldn't need etiquette to, how do I put this? To think before you speak and to behave intentionally.
Etiquette might not be the right word.
Well, no, I was going to say, but while they're still learning, etiquette's not a bad guardrail. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we are getting that sound again, so we should probably wrap, because this was a good second chunk of two women talking on porn and princesses. As much as we could talk about it under YouTube guidelines, this will be a very interesting experiment to see how YouTube handles this. I argue it's good though. So, Song, what have you got coming up? I know you've been sick, so.
I'm still on a bit of a hiatus at the moment with writing. Hopefully, I can do some drawing soon though.
Yeah. I got to get a flu shot. This has been vaccine month, and this is one of those things where you go slow to go fast, but I keep feeling I'm not getting enough done, because it's like, oh, booster, spend 3 days recovering. Yay. But you got to do it. Yeah. Right. I say I'm doing my part for the war effort, which is another Captain America thing. And I'm sorry, if I can model my behavior after these superheroes, so can other people.
You would think.